Today, we're going to talk about how to start an essay in an organized way. It is important because the introduction is the first thing your teacher reads, and it can be the difference between an A and that other not so nice grade. I will give you a basic structure to organize your introduction paragraph that you can actually use for any essay you write. So let's get, hey, listen up back there. Sorry. Let's talk about the purpose of an introduction paragraph. Think about when you meet someone for the very first time. Hopefully you look nice, you speak clearly, and you don't totally embarrass yourself like this guy. Hey, be nice here. When you meet someone for the very first time, you're just trying to learn a couple things about them, like their name or where they're from, not their whole life story. In fact, if you learn too much, too quickly, it can be overwhelming to the point where you forget the important stuff, like their name, and that's just awkward. And then the next time you see them, you're like, hey, chief. It's the same thing with starting an essay. Just focus on the key things. You want to grab the reader's attention, tell them some basic information about your topic, and then tell them the purpose of your essay. You don't want to overwhelm them with too many details, so stick to the basic structure. Every good essay introduction follows a simple structure, just like every house has a structure. Also, in case you're wondering, my house is still for sale. Ain't nobody trying to buy that house. We have to work on your manners. Here is a basic structure to start your essay with. First, you begin with a hook, and then you have the background information, followed by the essay question, and then last you have your thesis statement. That's it? Yes and no. Writing's tough and can never be broken down to a simple formula. But that being said, if you start with this basic structure and then build the rest of your introduction around that, adding your own style and words, and also transitions between each part, you're off to a really good start. I want to give you a general overview of the hook of your introduction. The goal is to start off your essay by grabbing the reader's attention, just like a hook grabs the attention of a fish. It does more than grab their attention. It doesn't hurt them, does it? Your hook should be about 2 to 3 sentences, not too long, but just enough to get them interested. And like I said before, you want to add a transition that connects your hook to your topic. You'll see that in purple. The next part of your introduction paragraph is the background information. The goal here is to think about your topic from the audience's perspective. What do they know? And more importantly, what do they not know about your topic? You may be an expert on your topic, but do not assume your teacher or the reader is. Wait, I thought teachers knew everything. No, teachers, they know everything. This is where you help the reader by giving them a basic understanding and context of your topic, by explaining any historical information or defining key terms or ideas. Do not start proving or arguing the main points of your essay with evidence here. Save that for later. Oh, so this is where I start arguing my main point with evidence and stuff? Really? The goal here is to give them the basic context of your topic so that they can understand the rest of your essay. The next part in organizing your introduction paragraph is the essay question. Most likely, this is given to you by your teacher. Why do you have to put the question in the introduction if the teacher already knows it? Well, it's important for 2 reasons. 1, you tell the reader the purpose of your essay. 2, by stating your essay question, it keeps you as a writer accountable to actually answering the question in your essay. It's like when you get in the car to drive somewhere and you put the directions in your phone, it not only tells you where to go, but it tells you when you go off course. And that really helpful but annoying voice.
Follow the highlighted route.
And just like that, by stating your question, it keeps you accountable to staying on track. Again, notice I don't just state the question, but I add a transitional phrase. The goal of this essay is to answer the question, and by stating that, I make it clear, organized, and easy to read. The last part of your introduction, and the most important part, is your thesis. Remember, I call that the baby. Do not start talking in that baby voice. Hey, I'll do what I want. Little baby. Your thesis is a concise, clear, accurate, and precise answer to your essay question. That's why it comes directly after the question in the introduction. Your thesis has to, should be, and will be the last sentence of your introduction paragraph. That way your teacher knows exactly where to look for it. Basically, don't lose the baby. Let's look at my example. I start off my introduction with a hook and then I transition to the background information. After that, I transition to the essay question, and finally, in my example, you have the thesis statement. If you want to pause this video right now to read through my whole example, I would highly advise that. Reread your introduction paragraph and revise and edit it by asking these questions. Do you start off your essay with a hook that grabs the reader's attention? Do you then provide some basic information about your topic to help give the reader context? In your introduction, do you state your essay question followed by your thesis statement, which remember is the last sentence in your introduction paragraph? Super important. Do you add transitions between each part to make it flow and sound natural for the reader? Lastly, check your spelling and grammar. As always, I have free resources in the video description below. Make sure to subscribe because I will walk you through the entire writing process from start to finish. Comment and tell us which is the toughest part of the introduction for you. Is it the hook, the background information, the essay question, the thesis, or is it adding transitions between each part? Make sure to like the video. Ciao.